Fine, fine. Thank you.
So,
Good. Thank you.
yes, Dr. Khushnam.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Manish. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Once again, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Khushnam, Director of Research, the Indian Futures. And today here with the panel discussion on recent developments in Middle East, India and Israel perspective. The panel discussion has been organized by Indian Future with the collaboration with the Israeli Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. At the outset, I would like to say a few words about our think tank, that is the Indian Futures. As Manish has said, it has started in 2017 as a new India's global think tank, in an independent think tank based in Delhi. We collaborate and engage with different think tanks and the institutions of academic excellence all around the globe. We collaborate with different embassies and the diplomatic mission to get their views on issues of global importance, as well as views on India. The core intent of the entire exercise of TIF is to understand the global issues, the regional geopolitics and the incentives and the pursuits of the global and the regional actor, so that we can make India's voice and national interest strong. To take India at the center of the global politics of diplomacy as a recognizable power and shaper of the emerging world order. As a civilizational power equipped with knowledge economy, and building a strong strategic community. At the To begin the entire panel discussion, I would like to have a brief outline of the region to put the discussion into context. We all know it that the Middle East is the geopolitical center of the world and the index of the global geopolitics. The share of influence any power has in this region is a yardstick of their influence at the global stage. The global geopolitical trends find expression in this region, as well as whatever happens in this region having repercussions all around the world. To understand it better, we divide it into three parts from India's point of view. We divide the region into three regional power centers, that is Iran, Israel, and the Arab world, led by GCC, basically by Saudi Arabia and UAE. And the emerging multipolar world is also finding a geopolitical competition in this region. There are four external powers, basically, which are active now at this moment of time. There are US, with its allies and partners, and its forward CENTCOM headquarters. Fifth Fleet is the most dominant power in the region, and followed by we have Russia. Recently, they are using a lot of oil and gas politics and involvement in Syrian crisis with their bases in Tartus and Latakia has played a very important role. And then comes the Chinese with the partnership diplomacy, economic engagement, investment, infrastructure, digital expansion in the region, which they're trying to convert into a geopolitical game. And fourth one is the Indian engagement. We have in India the best on our energy security, maritime security, Indo-Pacific vision, defense and military cooperation, and which has been furthered by the I2U2 and the IMEC framework. So with this, I would like to say that basically the last one decade has been a very important era in Indian policy in this region. In that decade, I want to call it as a Modi era momentum. During this time, last one decade, the India has adopted the policy of Think West policy and extended neighborhood policy in this region. And they are trying to go beyond the traditional policies, which are based on energy, trade, and diaspora. Beyond that, defense, security, infrastructure, investment, and supply chain. This is a very important one. And another important point that this decade has been very important in development of profound convergence and synergy between India and Israel in their pursuit in the region and beyond. And that most important, at the heart of this is the dehyphenation of India's Palestine-Israel policy. which has made this possible. And the visit of India's Prime Minister in 2017 boosted the process, and dense diplomatic engagement and economic engagement in the region with all the important countries of the region has India's position very strong and brought this entire region into the geopolitical orbit of India. But the Gaza war and the collapse of Assad regime has changed a lot. Even then, and in this situation where India stands, that's very important. I would like to make this clear with the statement of our Prime Minister on 7th of October last year, immediately after the Hamas attack on Israel. I would like to quote the same. I quote, "Deeply shocked by the news of terrorist attack in Israel, our thoughts and prayers are with the innocent victims and their families. We stand in solidarity with Israel at this difficult hour." Unquote. This is very clear where India stands. Even then, the conflict has created a lot of challenge for India because of we have relation with Israel, Palestine, Iran, and the Arab world. But despite all this, our Prime Minister has played a very, very, very important and smart role and talking to all the important countries involved in the crisis. Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Mahmoud Abbas, President of Iran, rulers of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and all other countries in the region. We have pursued a balanced approach based on our non-aligned and multi-aligned policy to keep our interests safe and be in the side of peace. Our stand in the United Nations organizations and a special BRIC summit on the crisis is a telling testimony of that fact. And despite all the conflict underway, India continues with its pursuit. Recently, we have played a very important role and we have picked many important gains in this region. Last year, February, India and UAE signed the first intergovernmental framework of agreement on IMEC. That is the first agreement on IMEC. Then Saudi Arabia has signed 250 million agreement with Munition India Limited, another one with Bharat Electronics Limited. Then with Oman, we are at the high advanced stage of FTA, that is Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. With Qatar, we have signed $78 billion deal in LNG for next 20 years, which is less than the current price for next 20 years. And last month itself, our Prime Minister visited Kuwait and has upgraded the relationship to the strategic partnership level, and many defense and the trade agreement has been signed. So saying all this, the crisis, the Gaza crisis, Gaza war, and the collapse of Assad regime has changed a lot, and so all is not well. To make it brief, I would like to say what is the present state and syndromes. In that, I would like to say the direct strike between Iran and Israel has shifted the deterrence equilibrium in the region. Houthi strikes are still on. Talk of direct attack on nuclear facilities of Iran is increasing. Probable nuclear breakout of Iran is also there. And second side, with the collapse of Syrian regime of President Assad, the Turkey is rising, which may replace. I read today only in the Jerusalem Post that there is a fear that the replacement of Iran with Turkey in Syria can be a bigger challenge in terms of security. And at the same time, many of the diplomatic outreach is also being made by the countries like the US first delegation led by Assistant Secretary Barbara Leaf, then the Kuwaiti foreign minister as well as the GCC Secretary General has also reached to Damascus, and after the EU delegation led by the German foreign minister and the French foreign minister, as well as we find that last 1 week, the new Syrian regime's foreign minister, Hassan Assad Saibani, is also touring the GCC countries and all the Arab countries for a diplomatic outreach. So these are the scenario. I want to stop here for the panelists to deal with that. And now first I would like to introduce our speakers of the panel discussion today. We have with us Professor Efraim Inbar, Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, He will be talking on Israel is winning the war against the Shiite Axis. Then we have Professor Hillel Frisch, Professor Emeritus at Bar Ilan University. He will be speaking on the consequences of fall of Assad in Syria. Then we have Group Captain Rajshekhar Mehta, Director Academics and General Secretary of Indus International Research Foundation based in New Delhi and Bangalore. He'll be talking on recent developments in the Middle East, implications for India. I would like to, before we start the panel discussion, I would like to give a little more introduction of our speaker. First, about the Professor Efraim Inbar. He's he is the director of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He has been the founder of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies for 23 years, 1993 to 2016. Professor of Political Studies at Bar Ilan University. He has been the visiting professor of many of the important universities of the world, including Georgetown University, John Hopkins University, Boston University, and many others, and written many books. Here, I would like to mention 3 books of him. That is Outcast Countries in the World Community, War and Peace in Israeli Politics, and the last one I can see, that is Israel National Security Issues and Challenges since the Yom Kippur War. And then we have Professor Hillel Frisch is the Professor Emeritus at Bar Ilan University, the former senior researcher in the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. Amongst his latest work, I want to mention the Rethinking the Arab Spring Winners and Losers, the Palestine Military 2, not 1, and another important one, Assessing Iran's Soft Power in the Arab World from Google Trend. And then we have Group Captain Rajshekhar Mehta, Director, Academics and General Secretary for Indus International Research Center, Research Foundation. He joined JNU in 1982, but immediately after that, he switched to join Indian Air Force. Finally, he retired in the rank of Group Captain, winning the prestigious award of Shaurya Chakra from the President of India and commendation medals from the Chief of Air Staff twice. He worked in the Amity University as the Deputy Dean of Student Welfare and OSD to the Vice Chancellor of the university. He taught history there as well as pursued his PhD in China's Belt and Road Initiative. He's an author, prolific writer, researcher, well-known face on geopolitics, strategic studies, and international affairs. With this, I would like to, I request Professor Efraim Inbar for his opening remark. I would like to summarize first how we will go about. First, the opening remark will be there by the panelist, 8 to 10 minutes. Summary remark by discussant, then remark or observation by the panelist on their opening remarks or of the other panelist, or supplementary remarks by the panelist, if any. Then there will be an open question answer session. So now I request Professor Efraim Inbar for his opening remark. So please.
Your request is granted.
Thank you.
I would like to point out first, before everything, that there were a lot of publications heralding a new Middle East. And I'm sorry, I don't see a new Middle East in the horizon. So yes, we are back to the old Middle East. And it is a Middle East with different, balances of power, alignments, but it is the old Middle East, which has been fought with in confrontations for decades. And of course, there was a big surprise when one of Iran's proxies, Hamas, attacked Israel, and it looked not very good for Israel. But Israel is winning the longest war in its history. It's not over. It may take maybe a year more. We were able to basically beat 2 Iran proxies, 1 Hamas. Their military power has actually been eliminated. We are fighting now remnants of their units. It is not easy. Gaza is small, but it's large enough to cause us trouble and enough tunnels and territory to hide a few hundred and maybe more of Hamas terrorists. What we are doing now is basically a mopping operation. And this will take time. And I know that the world, including President Trump, is impatient. They want to see the war ended, enough. But what can we do? Hamas has a different watch. And they are continuing to oppose the Israeli president. The Israeli goal is simple, to take out Hamas control from Gaza. Hamas was given a chance by Israel to be a nice neighbor, and we failed. Actually, for the last 15 years, they terrorized Israel by launching thousands of missiles. They still have a few missiles, and we've seen in the recent weeks, occasional dropping of 1, 2 missiles a day, a week. But Israel is determined to finish it, and there is much talk about the day after. There's not going to be any day after before Hamas is demolished. And they lose not only military power, but they lose civilian control over parts of the population. They are using the humanitarian aid, which they are hijacking, to sell it on Gaza markets. They are becoming rich from the war, and also they are able to recruit additional people by giving them food and taking care of providing food for their families. This is a recent way of recruiting Hamas people. And it's, as I mentioned, it's going to last at least for another year if there will be no interference or outside intervention. On the northern front, Hezbollah joined the second day after the war Hamas, and the Israeli preference, strategic preference, was to concentrate on one front, Gaza, and only later go on to the north to deal with Hezbollah. And but throughout 15 months, we were very successful in decapitating basically the organization, not only the highest levels, but also mid-levels. Everybody remembers the pagers event, and in which thousands were put out of action. And Hezbollah has been seriously weakened. We are also successful in paralyzing a large part of their missile arsenal and all other ammunitions that could reach Israel. It is an organization that was actually willing to accept a ceasefire with Israel and to delink itself from Gaza, which was one of their preconditions. This is an important part of the war. Of course, we were attacked also directly by Iran, and this didn't do much damage. Our missile defense, the Air Force, was successful in parrying those attacks. And what is more important, that Israel's Air Force was successful in destroying the air defense of Iran, leaving it vulnerable. So the war is being won. Israel regained deterrence, which was seriously damaged by the October 7 attack. Politically, what is extremely important, the Abraham Accords were saved. The Abraham Accords were a result of Israeli power, Israeli military power, and the ability to face Iran. Another development in the region is that it was referred already to by moderator. The Shiite axis suffered serious blows, Hamas, Hezbollah, to some extent the Houthis, which are still active, and of course they lost Syria. I think this will be addressed in greater detail by my colleague, Professor Hillel Frisch. And what is very important that, I mentioned it, Iran is vulnerable, and it remains to be seen when Israel and the US will capitalize on this opportunity to terminate the Iranian nuclear effort. A third important element in the region is the rise of a radical Sunni axis because of the fall of Assad and the rise of Turkey. Turkey is not new to it has forces in Syria, in Iraq, it has forces in Libya, in Djibouti. So it is a powerful actor in the region. It is the largest army in NATO, with the exception of the United States. And what is different from Turkey and other NATO allies is the Turks are ready to fight. The Italians are. The Germans, I don't think they are ready to fight. So it is an actor that is being led by Islamists. President Erdogan is a Turkish version of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is indeed a revisionist power, and it is a power that we have to take seriously into consideration. And so far, it seems that Turkey has great appetite. It's neo-Ottoman and Islamist impulses are pushing Turkey into a more dangerous road in the Middle East. A fourth recent trend is, of course, the exit of Russia from Syria. It has moved its military assets to Libya, still in the Middle East, as well as in Africa. And in any case, what is important globally is that it weakened the China, Russia, Iran alignment. And this is something important also for India that faces more revisionist from China. The fifth and very important Middle East event happened outside the Middle East. It happened in the United States. We see the beginning of a second Trump presidency. This presidency seems so far to be very pro-Israeli. It has a lot of appointments of people that are known for their pro-Israeli views. This will allow Israel probably more freedom of action, which is, from an Israeli point of view, a good development, because the current presidency of Biden imposed restriction upon Israeli freedom of action, arms boycotts, and despite its basic support of Israel, there were many tensions between Israel and the United States. The big question about Trump is to what extent he will be involved in the region. He has some isolationist impulses. Part of his vice president is isolationist. Will he help the Kurds? Will American forces stay in Iraq? Will the Americans do something serious about the Houthis? All those questions are not clear. And the questions are clear, the answers to those questions are not clear, and remains to be seen. The Middle East policy of a country like the United States, of course, will have great influence on the future, or at least on the immediate future of the Middle East. And I'll rest here.
Thank you, Professor. Is it?
Yes, Khushnam, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
We don't hear you. We do not hear you.
Khushnam, please unmute yourself. You're muted.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor. Your speech was very enlightening, and you have put the entire theme into the perspective. You talked about the new Middle East after the Gaza war and the goal of taking Hamas out of Gaza. Hezbollah is completely decimated. Iran's missile capacity has drastically been reduced. Israel regained the deterrence.
We don't see the speaker.
Yes, and Iran is vulnerable, and the emerging Iran, China, and Russia triangle is another important geopolitical challenge in the region, which is shared by India as well. And with this, now I invite Professor Hillel Frisch for his opening remark. So please.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me. Basically, some of the points have already been expressed by Efraim Inbar, but I'll reiterate them. Israel, according to most Middle East analysts, I'm talking about Arabs, especially Arab analysts, have claimed that Israel has regained, if not enhanced, its image as a regional powerhouse. Of course, this was highly compromised by the October 8th attack, Hamas attack, but not only by the Hamas attack. The following day, Hezbollah, under basically Iranian orders, began participating in the war by launching on a daily basis aerial projectiles, mostly missiles. And this gave the feeling that Israel was really going to be under a missile siege of what they called the resistance axis. And this was later amplified by attacks both from the Houthis and by proxies, militia proxies in Iraq itself. So it really seemed that Israel was under a noose, ready to be decapitated. And of course, this has completely changed. Now, why has this been changed? This perception is based on Israel's successful war in Gaza, in which Hamas no longer has the capabilities to strike at Israel proper. I would like to point out that since the October Hamas offensive, it's much more than a terrorist attack. It was really a military offensive that probably involved around 4,000 fighters. But since then, not one terrorist squad has managed to cross from Gaza into Israel. This is a major achievement. And there have been no large-scale strategic ramifications for a long time, such as the closing of Israel's major international airport, or the need to mobilize a large number of reservists who are very expensive economically in two ways. Not only do you have to pay them full salaries, but the economy hurts because these are the elite, Israel's economic elite, and their jobs are very important to the Israeli economy. But even more so, it is based on Israel's successful campaign against Hezbollah, which surprisingly to me is viewed by Middle East analysts as one of the prime reasons for the launching of the rebel offensive in December and the collapse of the Syrian Arab army. Most Arab analysts claim that Hezbollah was the major military actor during the civil war in Syria to protect the regime. And once it was defeated, and could no longer provide that kind of protection, both the rebel terrorists in Syria felt that that was the time to strike, and that the Syrian Arab army was no match for them. But most of all, Israel's reemergence as a regional powerhouse is due to the effects of the fall of the Assad regime and the weakening of the Iranian imperialist axes based on local proxies that undermine Arab states. They not only call for the Iranians and their proxies do not only call for the destruction of Israel, their existence, their mere existence in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, basically destroyed these Arab states, and the Arab states are very worried about this massive Iranian imperialist project. The collapse of the Syrian regime also improved relations between Israel and Russia, and I'd like to point out why. In the face of jihadist rebels, many of whose fighters are Chechens and even Muslims from predominantly Muslim oblasts, provinces within Russia. I mean, there's a province in Russia 600 kilometers away from Moscow that is predominantly Muslim, and they've been sending fighters to the Islamic State and to the other jihadist groups, and this very much worries Russia because it's also connected to Russia's demographic problem that the Muslims have a higher fertility rate than the very low Russian. And it has also affected the troubled Russian relationship for the better. Now Israel and Russia have a common enemy, the jihadists, the rebels who took over Syria. This is why the Russians gave the green light to Israel's Air Force campaign against what remained of Syria's military infrastructure, which was almost completely destroyed in over 400 sorties since the fall of Assad's regime. And this included bombing the Syrian naval base in Tartus, which is literally only hundreds of meters away from the massive Russian naval base. In other words, Putin was ready to endanger his naval base in Tartus so that Israel could do the job, because they even less than Israel wanted the present day leaders of Syria to have these weapons. So arguably, Israel has for the first time two world powers who are always at odds, Russia and the United States and Russia, which in the case of Russia basically support Israel. This has major repercussions on the regional balance of power. Many Arab analysts, and I think one of the director made reference to this, especially those who sided with Bashar Assad and the Iranian alliance, believe that the Iranian-led heterodox crescent will be replaced by a Turkish-led, Qatar-financed Sunni axis, and I would like to add, according to the Israeli wording, of evil. This would, of course, be bad news for Israel were this to come about, that Syria might now become a Sunni terrorist launching point to replace the Shiite-led, Iranian-led axes. But of course, there's no doubt that the rebel government, if it succeeds in ruling Syria, and that is still a question mark, that it will be a Turkish protectorate led by an Islamic fundamentalist Erdogan. But both Turkey and Qatar, unlike Iran, have to be more cautious in the war against Israel, and especially against other Arab states like Jordan, than Iran ever was. Qatar still needs the US to protect itself from both Iran and Saudi Arabia. I mean, Qatar is a walkover state, and its allies. Turkey has no oil or gas, a natural commodity that can be sold under the table, whatever it does. But rather, it has an advanced export-oriented economy in which 49% of its exports are sold to the US and to the EU and the US. So it has to, some extent, remain moderate. And it's also true for Qatar. I'm not, there certainly is a fear that this government in Syria, which is really fundamentalist, can be a launching point against both Israel and moderate states, but because of their sponsors, Turkey and Qatar, they'll be more limited. This fear of a Turkish axis supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, in addition to existing fears of Iranian imperialism, should strengthen the Abraham Accord process. The moderate Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, need Israel. And this is all the more true since they believe that the US is distancing itself from the region. And finally, the Trump administration is viewed as being very biased towards Israel. Trump is a pretty mercurial fellow, so we're not sure that this is going to be the case. But that perception always contributes to Israel's standing in the region. So from an Israeli perspective, where we are in good shape despite having gone through hard times.
Thank you, Professor. What I can make out that you again reiterated that the deterrence of Israel has been restored. No militant group has entered Israeli territory after last year's attack. The emergence of Israel as a regional powerhouse with the fall of Syria, and another important consequence of fall of Assad regime in Syria is the again closeness between Israel and Russia, which the relationship has improved, which has changed the balance of power in the region. And so far as the talk about Turkey replacing Iran in Syria is concerned, the dependency of Turkey in EU and US for its market is very, very important and notable, and which will keep the Turkey in the mind all the time, and it will not be able to create as much problem as it is being expected. That is what, with this, I now move to the next speaker, Group Captain Raj Shekhar Mehta. Please, sir, with your opening remark.
Thank you, Dr. Khushnam. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by thanking Dr. Khushnam and Dr. Dabati for having me on this show and to share the dais with our eminent guests, Israeli Professor Inbar and Professor Frisch. Indeed, our both panelists have given us excellent details of the latest development in West Asia. I will not be talking much about the Israel-Hamas conflict taking place in that part of the region, because two specialists have already given their view, and Dr. Khushnam has also given fairly good detail of the power dynamics that is in play in that region. But I have two small clarifications to give you before I begin. Firstly, it's been 12 years since I retired from the Government of India service and now associated with an Indian think tank. Hence, the views and opinion being expressed by me here must be treated strictly as my own, and by no means it should be construed to represent the views of the government of India or the organization I represent. Secondly, when the Western scholars use the term Middle East, we in India get a bit, to tell you frankly, confused. Confused because we sit at the center of Asia, and when we look to our east, we find Indochina, China, Japan, etc. And when we look to our west, we only find Arabian subcontinent. So for us, there is no Middle East. For us, there is only East Asia or West Asia, and that's why we call this region as West Asia. In the 19th and 20th centuries, when the world revolved around Europe and America, viewing the world through the European prism and European lenses, and calling this region Middle East perhaps might have made some sense. However, today we are living in a multipolar world. In this world, each pole views the world from its own standpoint. From India's standpoint, I wish to assure our guest panelists from Israel present here that overwhelming majority in India have no doubt that state of Israel and Israelis are as much part of Asia as any Asian can be. Let's have no doubt about that. This needed a special mention because Indian foreign policy perspective is intrinsically linked to the fact how India views the world and how it envisions its role in it. Need not to say, the Indian foreign policy perspective, though based on hardcore realism and pragmatism, does uphold certain basic fundamental values. We should not forget that India is a civilizational state, and much like Israel, derives much of its value from its cultural moorings going back to its nearly 3,000 to 5,000 years old unbroken history. Our current foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has brought this out beautifully in his book on India's foreign policy by the name The India Way. I will therefore first mention some of the broad yet fundamental principles under which Indian foreign policy operates before discussing its West Asia policy within those parameters. First and foremost, India does not approve of any kind of cross-border aggression except in self-defense. That is why India stands by Israel for its right to defend itself post-October 7th. Second, it follows a policy of zero tolerance of terrorism. Therefore, Prime Minister of India was one of the first world leaders to ring up President Benjamin Netanyahu to denounce October 7 carnage perpetrated by Hamas. Next, India does not approve of any kind of expansionism post-World War II border alliance. Therefore, as a matter of principle, India has extended support to the UN resolution for restoration of 1967 borders with Israel and Palestine. This can be controversial from the Israeli point of view. At the same time, India is opposed to any state, and this is important, opposed to any state exporting any kind of cross-border ideology and violent radical revolution, howsoever lofty or righteous it may claim to be. This is one issue that remains ironically muted in the current Iran-India bilateral relationship, which Indian government needs to resolve with Iran in the context of Israel-Iran conflict. Prime Minister of India has said on so many occasions, including while visiting Russia and at G20 platform, that the age of war is over. International issues cannot be settled through war. India is in favor of settlement of all international dispute and differences through the negotiations without resorting to war. Therefore, Prime Minister of India has personally spoken to the leaders, as brought out Dr. Khushnam, of the warring faction in Ukraine and West Asia to stop the war and sit down for negotiations. However, the most controversial and most consequential, and yet the most less understood foreign policy principle followed by Mr. Modi and Dr. Jaishankar can be summed up in these few words. India is friends to all and enemy to none, until its interests and security are threatened directly. India refuses to become part of any military alliance or antagonistic groupings to maintain its strategic independence. That does not prohibit India from cooperating with any country or group to enhance its own security and national interests. And that's why we are in the Quad, and we are in so many international forums from both sides of the antagonizing groups in the world. India also does not believe in the principle, my friend enemy is my enemy. No, sorry, we don't believe in that. India insists that its friendly states must deal with India based on the mutual convergence of interest rather with reference to any third country. While the above background, let's turn to West Asia. If we talk of trade, West Asia is India's top priority area. 2/3 of its energy comes from this region. Gulf trade constitutes 15.8% of India's total exports. Nearly 8 million Indians work in Gulf, sending India approximately $50 million annual remittances. Value of India's merchandise traded with Gulf is 150 million. India has 240 million Muslims who constitute 40% of India's total population. India is deeply interested in two extremely strategic multimodal trade corridor passing through West Asia. One is India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor that is called IMEC, IMEC, I think Dr. Khushnam mentioned about that, that connects India's Mumbai port to Europe via Saudi Arabia and Israel. And the second is 13 Nations International North-South Transport Corridor, INSTC. That connects India to Russia via Iranian port of Chabahar. It passes through the Chabahar port lease to India for the next 20 years. It's very important. While INSTC is already functional, IMEC corridor that passes through Saudi Arabia, Haifa, and goes to Europe is still on the drawing board. And its fate is tied up to the peaceful resolution of the current round of conflict in West Asia. Therefore, it can be seen that India remains deeply impacted by whatever happens in West Asia. India has a huge stake in West Asia's stability, peace, and prosperity. Because of these factors, India had welcomed the Abraham Accord and promised ushering an era of peace and stability in West Asia. Unfortunately, and my previous speakers have already brought out, unfortunately, this promising treaty has been targeted and sabotaged by the forces whose political interest lies in keeping West Asia boiling and destabilized. Thankfully, there is a change in the power equation, and we hope that Abraham Accord will get a new lease of life. There is an emotive dimension to this conflict as well that cannot be ignored. The current round of Hamas-Israel conflict has strong ideological moorings. It has wider geopolitical dimension. India and Indians are deeply concerned with the immense suffering of Gazans and loss of precious lives on both sides of the conflict. I believe that much of it was avoidable if Hamas leadership had displayed sensitivity and concern for the suffering of their own civilians. This war is not yet over. The root cause of the conflict are intact. Those who hold the remote controls and orchestrate such events have not given up their agendas yet. Till the time cross-border export of revolutionary ideologies, military support, supply of arms, and financing of cross-border terrorism is not stopped completely, the recurrence of this conflict in future cannot be guaranteed. This is what I will say in my opening remark, and Dr. Khushnam, Dr. Jose.
We don't hear you.
Thank you, Group Captain. And nicely you have put the Indian perspective, and you have reiterated the India's support for Israel and Israel as an Asian nation, and India's zero tolerance against terrorism, and reiterated it is not an era of what the Prime Minister Modi has said. It is not an era of war, and the diplomacy must be given the chance. And at the same time, the kind of strategy we follow, your enemy may not be my enemy. And this is what the India's multi-aligned policy speaks for. And with this, the situation remains very grim in the region, which is very, very important for India's geoeconomic and geopolitical interest. And therefore, given the kind of scenario it is developing now, it looks like I have told about already there are four important global powers which are playing the important role. As the war has with the coming of the war, and now things are getting clear, the China's stand and the Russia's stand is now looking like it is more a pro-Iranian, and India is completely in the side of the peace and look like more in the side of US and Israel. That is the dividing line emerging now. And given the geopolitical change and the landscape of Middle East, I would like to reiterate that the people the leadership in India and Israel must work together in this time of geopolitical flux, so that we can attain our shared geopolitical interest as well as prosperity together. With this word, now I would like to go for the question answer session. But before I can open to the audience, I would like to have one question to all the panelists, one question each. The first, the question is for Professor Efraim Inbar. So, what strategy, Professor, you think that Israel should adopt after the Gaza war for security of Israel as well as peace and stability in the wider region, so that it can pursue its security vision in the spirit of Abraham Accord and its expansion? Because when the Gaza when the Hamas attack was there, before that the Israel Saudi Arabia normalization was much in the talk. And at the same time, yesterday I read in the Jerusalem Post that EU in talk with US and Israel about the post-Gaza war provisional government, which should be the reformed Palestinian Authority to govern Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem under an independent Palestine state. And yesterday only, the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar was there in UAE talking to his UAE counterpart. What can we read into that, Professor?
Thank you very much for your question. First, I want to express my deep appreciation to the Indian Futures think tank and its leader, Dr. Manish Bahade, for our cooperation, and I hope this is not the first time, it will not be the I think there are a few lessons that Israel has learned from the war. First of all, that it needs a larger army to prevent such attacks and to be able to have more forces on the border. Also, it will be preferable to be able to wage a two-front war, which we didn't have yet. So we need a larger army. We need also probably independent military industry, a larger one to overcome at least partially potential stoppage of arms deliveries from our allies. In terms of strategy, I think that Israel is returning to a predilection for preemptive attacks because we are not going to allow the emergence of strong forces along the border, which eventually will exact a high cost from Israel. So it prefers to kill our enemies as early as possible. This is the emerging strategy. We of course open to further expansion of the Abraham Accords. Our main concern with Saudi Arabia is that they seem to condition normalization with Israel on developing nuclear infrastructure, which is problematic for us. And if the quid pro quo is an embassy in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem and Saudi flags there, I'm not sure the price is right for us. About the Palestinian issue, I'll say very shortly that the Palestinian Authority has embraced Hamas. They say they are part of their political system. 70 to 80% of the Palestinians in Gaza, as well as in the West Bank, have supported the atrocities committed by Hamas. And for the time being, the Palestinians are not right to become a good neighbor. Therefore, I don't think that the Palestinian state is a card.
Thank you, Professor. Surely, the Abraham Accord has been a very important initiative, and it is surely in the interest of India. And we have the support for all. India is having a lot of support for that, because this Abraham Accord syndrome plays a very important role for the expansion of India's interest and engagement in the region. So, with this now, I move to Professor Hillel Frisch. Sir, I would like to know from you, what can be the strategy of Israel in the post-Assad Syria, where the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is coming to the power, given its past terrorism record, and given the short-term strategy of Israel in line with its long-term strategy. Because at the same time, we can see that the EU, US, GCC, all are trying to having an outreach with them, as well as their minister, the foreign minister and the delegation is touring the Arab capitals. So in this scenario, what can be the short-term strategy of Israel, keeping in view the longer-term strategy of Israel for peace and security in the region?
I think that Israel basically agrees with the European Union, with the United States, and most foreign policy regarding these rebels, that it will be what they do, not what they say, that will direct Israeli foreign policy. I mean, the Israeli government would like a stable Syria, and we are not Christians. We don't proselytize. We don't tell other people how to live, what kind of regime they want. As far as we're concerned, as long as it's a stable Syrian state that is not massively abusive towards its citizens, like, for instance, North Korea, or maybe the Bashar regime that they replaced, will be perfectly happy to live and coexist, and even ultimately to make peace with the Syrian regime, provided that they play within the rules of the game. That's basically Israel's position. It's very similar to the American position. It's similarly to the European Union position. But we are slightly more vulnerable, slightly at least, than the European Union or the United States. And therefore, we have to be more concerned and more wary. And this is why we made two very important preemptive moves. We took over the highest mountain in the region, which has tremendous intelligence control. It'll only be after a peace treaty that we'll give that up. And we also advanced maybe 1 or 2 kilometers into Syrian territory along the Golan Heights just to assure that there's no terrorist infrastructure being developed in the way that the Iranian militia proxies developed it before the downfall of the regime. Israel is not overly concerned with Syria. Even if Syria becomes threatening, it'll take a long time before it becomes the state that can threaten Israel like it used to 30, 40 years ago when it was in a strong alliance with Russia. Basically, Israel's strategy has to be directed at Iran. Iran is Israel's focal military threat, not because we want it. We don't want, there was a pro-Iranian lobby in Israel 30 years after the Iranian Revolution that argued that we could make peace. Their rhetoric is only rhetoric, but it isn't rhetoric. They're trying to nuclearize, and they keep on threatening with the destruction of the state of Israel. So that's Israel's major security concern in the region.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. So now I'll move to Group Captain Rajshekhar Mehta. Sir, I would like to know how India has navigated so far in this war and the crisis in the Middle East, given its stand on Palestine, its strategic interest with Iran, and its close ties with Israel. Any suggestion, or what will be your opinion to the government and the policymakers, and especially when it looks like that there is a possibility of, because every day it is being talked, reports are there, attack on Iranian nuclear facilities, as well as possibility of Iran nuclear breakout. So if it really comes, the outcome happens, the scenario comes like that, what will be the India's stand and how India will secure its interest in the region?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khushnam. There are three protagonists in this drama. One is Iran, let's be frank, and Israel, and the third is the Palestinian issue. Now, Iran is an important ally of India. We will not call it ally, but we have dealings with Iran, and our relationship with Iran is not dependent on the kind of regime that is ruling it. Our relation with Iran has been civilizational. We have a strategic interest, we have trade interests, and this is the most difficult part of Indian diplomacy, how it is going to reconcile the proclivity of Iranian current regime to export revolution, radical Islamic revolution across its border to other nations, and we do not agree with that. And this is, I earlier also mentioned, is a challenge for the Indian government, how it is going to deal with that. Secondly, you mentioned that there is a high possibility that there can be a very massive air attack on Iran, and that will change the entire, and there can be a change of regime as well. It is all within the realms of possibility. I would say that India either way is not going to get affected by that, because India is in such a sweet spot that either way India is a beneficiary, because India is even if the Ayatollah regime is not there, the next regime that is going to come, I don't know whether it will come or not, will be definitely a democratic government and much more easier to deal with. Second is the Palestinian issue. Traditionally, if you see right from 1948 onwards, India was perhaps one of the earliest country to recognize Palestine, and foreign policies also has, of any nation, has got ups and downs. We have gone to one stream and we have evolved, and we are supportive of the Palestinian people. We have been supporting them all along. Still, we are sending aid to UN for the Palestinian people. So we will continue to, India will strive, and India has been advocating two nations theory and Palestinians right to exist and 1976 border. This is a controversial thing. This is another challenge. I think this is a call that Israel has to take. We wish, and it is a very wishful. Personally, I don't believe that in the near future this is going to happen. So this is a call again that Israel has to take, and we will take a very neutral stand on that, even though our policy is to two-nation theory. Third is Israel, and Israel is our strategic partner. We have excellent bilateral relation with Israel, and we, if you see, out of 1.4 million Indians, at least 1.1 million Indians resonate a lot with Israel. Of course, we have got around 1,400 million Muslims who may not be very favorably disposed of towards Israel because of the religious here, but they are also our citizens and their view matters. And that's why India's policy towards West Asian conflict has been a little balanced. It is a tightrope walking from domestic policy point of view as well. But as I brought out, India's economic interest and strategic interest lies in a peaceful West Asia, and India will strive very hard to convince everyone, either way, through the peace by strength, as America and Israel wants to follow, or through a more reasonable understanding among the warring parties to bring peace and have a reasonable, equitable solution to the problems that the region is facing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So, very, very nicely put the Indian point of view. I would like to add into that India, like any other nation, is in the side of its national interest, and its national interest lies in the side of peace. So with this, now my question come to an end. And if any other questions are there for the audience, we are ready to take. I think we can take two questions. Yeah. Aditya, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, sir. So my question is to Professor Frisch. Sir, after the ongoing Gaza war, we have seen the action taken by the IDF. And one of my conclusion is the increasing radicalization, which anyone can observe in Gaza and also in West Bank. So my question is, how is Israel planning to deal with the increasing radicalization after this Gaza war comes to an end? What would be the approach of the Israeli government to deal with this situation?
Unmute.
Sir, you are on mute.
Kindly unmute Professor Frisch.
Oh, I know. I it wasn't in my power to unmute. Okay. Basically, Israel, and before that, the Zionist movement has been facing Palestinian radicalism and Muslim fundamentalism and terrorism since the beginning of the Zionist movement, the return of the Jews to their ancestral homeland, which began more or less in 1880. In 2018, we were 60 million Jews in Palestine. Today, we're 7.5 million. In other words, what I want to say is that we've prospered despite Palestinian terrorism. Most Israelis would like to make peace tomorrow with the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, in 2006, in a free elections, they overwhelmingly, the Palestinians, voted for a movement, the Hamas movement, that is not willing to accept in any shape or form the two-state solution. And the present Palestinian National Authority, which is regarded as moderate, insists that they be part of the process. So it's very difficult for Israel to do anything less than react to this radicalism and terrorism through military means, and simply control it to a threshold that we can continue to live and prosper. That's basically the Israeli perception for the conceivable future. Iran thinks that it's supporting the Palestinians. Exactly the opposite. If Iran made peace with Israel, then there would truly be pressure within Israel to make peace with the Palestinians. But Israel, threatened internally by the Palestinians, externally by a state that calls for its destruction, is not prepared to make major concessions which would really risk the existence of the state of Israel. Iran is undermining the Palestinians rather than empowering them. If they would do the exact opposite, they would empower. They should remember that the Oslo peace process began when the United States had world hegemony, when Israel was less threatened. Then there was tremendous pressure on Israel. But there won't be tremendous pressure as long as the radicals dominate the Palestinian scene and the Iranians support them with the potential nuclearization.
Thank you, Professor. Any other question? Thank you, Professor. It is a very different perspective that if Iran makes peace with Israel, Israel will be in turn making peace with Hamas, and the peace will prevail in the region. That is in the interest of India.
Absolutely.
I would like to say that with this. Any other question is there? Manish, can I go for one more question? Just observation, and because I want to ask something from Professor Hillel Frisch. If time is there, I can go ahead for 2 minutes.
Yes, Khushnam, please go ahead.
Yeah, sir, I read 2 of your articles in the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. In that, you have mentioned one about Netanyahu doctrine, and another one, Israel must strike the Shiite periphery. If you elaborate on that for our audience, so it will be nice.
To strike it, one of the most difficult things is to remember what you yourself wrote. No, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. To strike at the Shiite periphery.
So that
in
so that
Lebanon.
they, so that so that they
I'm
cannot
trying.
yeah so that they cannot recruit more terrorists into their organization. Hezbollah.
Right. I think that the importance of that article has been overridden by developments since. Israel has weakened Hezbollah, so it no longer has to, to a sufficient extent that it doesn't really have to punish the periphery from which they recruit its their terrorists, their fighters. So basically, that's an article that really, because of the dramatic developments that took place since. The other is on
Netanyahu
the Netanyahu doctrine. Yeah, I think that Netanyahu truly believes, and he took it from his father, who was a well-known historian at Cornell University. I mean, he comes from a very learned family, that the Jews, despite their prominence in intelligence, in intelligence-based endeavors, were always failed in assuring their national security, and that Israel has to be very, very cautious, very much relying on its military strength, on its ability to strike at its enemies, if it wants to avert the kinds of disasters that the Jews met throughout their history. And I think that this is really his doctrine, and I really think that he, to a certain extent, he's right, and which explains to a great extent his popularity after being at the helm of power in a parliamentary electoral system where usually prime ministers don't last that long.
Thank you.
But okay.
Sorry, I just interrupted you because
No, fine.
the Netanyahu doctrine is gaining relevance given the scenario that now we have direct strike by Iran on Israel and Israel on Iran. So in that, how much this doctrine has requires to be changed, because it is talking about the deterrence which Israel was maintaining for long and not to attack directly Iran. But now the situation has changed completely.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that we learned in October is that we can't rely on deterrence. You have to sometimes you have to destroy your enemy, not only to, not merely deter them. I mean, to take an example from Bashar al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad wanted to destroy the Idlib enclave in 2020. It was the Russians that said, no, just keep them small, keep them in their rat trap. Well, it turned out that their rat trap destroyed his regime. Israel can't afford sometimes to make that same mistake. There are enemies that you have to defeat rather than merely deter.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And with that, we have come to the end of this session. And I would like to thank first all the three speakers who have given their very nice perspective in the Gaza war and the scenario after the fall of Assad regime in Syria. And we are feeling more aware and more informed, and this will surely help us to understand. And more than that, the understanding is growing, shared understanding is growing between the people in India and Israel. It will play a very important role to gain to retain our interest in the region in the future, so that we can move forward. With this word, now I would like to thank our entire team of TIF, who are working back as a back team in a technical team, helping to arrange the entire process, as well as Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Technology, strategy and security, for their collaboration, which had helped us to organize this session. And most importantly, to all the audience who has joined us today. And once again, I thank all the members of the TIF leadership, as well as the three speakers, Professor Efraim Inbar, Professor Hillel Frisch, Group Captain Rajshekar Mehta. And with this word, I would like to say, be safe, be aware, and work towards a lasting peace and security in the region. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.